Look, I get it. Kingdom Hearts is a goofy game made for kids. Literally. But it is still a story-focused game with its own themes and messages to explore, just like any other. Kingdom Hearts has a bit of a reputation of having a completely nonsensical storyline with poor writing. And while I don't really agree with that sentiment, I at least understand it. The series absolutely is convoluted and can be difficult to comprehend how all the aspects of the world and timeline work. I mean, the Heartless are made up of hearts, but have no body, and the Nobodies are made up of bodies with no heart. You'd think it'd be the other way around, but that's not what we're here to talk about today. What I'm interested in is analyzing the story of Kingdom Hearts on a figurative level. The first game specifically. I think even if you don't like the current direction of the series, the first game is an enjoyable, self-contained story. Revisit it if you haven't in a while, or give it a try. It has a noticeably different tone than the later games, and it was made without knowing there would be a sequel, which I find very curious because of the way the game ends. Since our first motivating question is about the ending, we're doing the spoiler warning early this time. We will be spoiling the entirety of Kingdom Hearts 1, from the bosses we fight to the ending of the story. We will not be talking about any other later game in the series. This will be your one and only spoiler warning. With that out of the way, a quick question. What is Sora's primary goal in Kingdom Hearts 1? It's to reunite with his friends, Riku and Kairi, right? Their world was destroyed and they were separated across the universe. Now, what's Donald and Goofy's goal? It's to find King Mickey, right? He just vanished and left them a letter that said to follow the key. Finally, what happens at the end of the game? Sora finds Riku and Kairi, but Kairi gets sent back to the Destiny Islands by herself, while Riku gets trapped in the Realm of Darkness along with Mickey. The game ends with Sora, Donald, and Goofy doing exactly what they've been doing since the start of the game, looking for their friends. If Kingdom Hearts 1's story wasn't written with a sequel in mind, why does the game end with our characters' goals not being resolved? Well, I don't think it's as simple as them wanting to leave some loose ends for the possibility of a sequel. Rather, I think it lies on the thematic level of Kingdom Hearts' story. We're going to be determining what the game's themes and messages are while also figuring out what tools the game uses to convey them. That means we'll be taking this game where Donald Duck and Cloud Strife can be in the same room completely seriously with a full literary analysis. With all that being said, just one little disclaimer, since this is a thematic analysis of Kingdom Hearts, we won't be talking much about the gameplay. I might say some things about it here and there, but it won't be our primary focus. Alright, we're now ready to begin. Welcome to Kingdom Hearts. I don't think it takes a lot of analysis or media literacy in general to understand what the main themes of Kingdom Hearts are at a basic level. It's very clearly a story meant for children, which means it's centered around a lot of concepts that are particularly relevant for them. We're going to be focused on two that I'll claim the game is about now, and we'll go over each of them in more detail afterward. First, I'd argue the central theme of the story is the difficulties that come with growing up. The process of getting older when you're a child is incredibly awkward and confusing. There are so many unknowns, but everyone has to do it eventually. The problem is it's inevitable and irreversible, which is the perfect combination to create anxiety. We'll find how this concept permeates throughout the entire game, even in places you wouldn't expect if you don't think twice about it. The second major theme is one Kingdom Hearts as a series is famously known for, and that's exploring what friendship really entails. The power of friendship is very much a real, tangible thing in this universe. What I find interesting about Kingdom Hearts 1 in particular is there's a lot of narrative focus on losing friends, either through strained relationships or simply losing touch. We'll be diving into that and how it relates to the overall messaging around growing up to ultimately create a big takeaway for the audience to learn and apply to their real lives. Sound good? Now let's start the game so you can see what I'm talking about. It's actually evident from the very beginning, like opening cinematic level of beginning. The opening to Kingdom Hearts is iconic, mostly for the song associated with it, but also for its very, for lack of a better term, weird visuals. Characters falling and flying around everywhere, plus lots of imagery of descending into water. Have you ever thought about the reason for any of this stuff? I mean, sure, some of it isn't too hard to figure out. Riku holding his hand out to Sora as a wave overtakes them is foreshadowing how Riku falls to darkness and tries to get Sora to join him later in the story, for example. That's cool, but what's all this about Sora descending into water? The intro starts with Sora plunging into the ocean before suddenly being transported back to his beach. The break only lasts for a moment because then it's straight into the whole Riku thing, but he washes up again on his beach with Kairi waiting for him. They celebrate before Sora looks up at the sky to see himself falling, realizing he's actually still been falling this whole time, and he goes straight back to diving into the ocean like how the intro started. Isn't all this bizarre for an action RPG opening? It could have been a flashy combat-heavy intro or something. Instead, when you break it up scene by scene, it's just Sora falling into water that's interrupted a couple of times by his friends. I know I said the opening would help demonstrate the themes I was talking about, but we don't have all the context we need to fully interpret it yet. Since the game shows you it at the beginning though, I will too. Keep the imagery in the back of your mind as we continue through the video. We'll return later. What I want to do now is a mini character analysis for our main trio, Sora, Riku, and Kairi. What are their personalities, their relationships, their goals and ambitions? Let's start with Sora. I'd say his defining characteristic is his optimism. He always tries to see the good in every situation. We can see that demonstrated when Sora finally finds Riku after their world is destroyed. Riku randomly vanishes after there's some tension between him and Donald, but Sora isn't bothered. He's just happy to know that Riku is okay. Honestly, even the fact that Sora had faith his friends were out there somewhere is a good showcase of his worldview. The Destiny Islands were swallowed by a void. He saw Riku fade into darkness and Kairi dissipate into nothingness in front of him, yet he doesn't have a single doubt that the two of them are still out there somewhere. He always trusts that things will work out eventually, although he's not a passive observer. He's always willing to lend a helping hand to those in need, and won't hesitate to save someone even if it puts himself in danger. Sora's level of optimism is so high that it borders on naivety and immaturity, but I actually don't think it crosses this line. To an extent, at least. He's only 14 years old, so of course he's going to make childish mistakes sometimes. He definitely has some silly ideas, like when the trio planned to sail across the ocean on a shabby raft with about a day's worth of food for 3 people, but Sora's optimism is never what gets him in trouble. In fact, Sora, for the most part, has a pretty good sense of who he should and shouldn't be trusting. He doesn't get tricked by any of the Disney villains. He even recognizes when Riku is acting strange in Monstro. He can't really articulate it, reducing it to just a gut feeling of Riku being on the wrong side, but I think this is proving Sora's a pretty good judge of character himself. I bring this up because the downside of being an outgoing, optimistic, trusting person is you're prone to having your kindness be taken advantage of. You see this all the time in children's stories especially, since it's an important lesson. Think of all the Disney movies out there when a young protagonist gets exploited by the villain somehow. Some of them are even in Kingdom Hearts, and we see similar events play out in-game, like with Ariel and Ursula. The interesting part is that Sora, despite sharing many qualities with characters like Ariel, never gets deceived because of them. In fact, it's actually Riku who falls victim. What could this mean, thematically speaking? Well, to answer that question, we've got to do our mini analysis of Riku first. Sora and Riku have been best friends for their entire lives, but they've also always had a friendly rivalry going on. They compete with each other regularly, and Riku usually has the edge over Sora. This is communicated through gameplay at the start of the game in a way I really like. Sora can spar with all his friends on the Destiny Islands, but Riku is by far the most difficult. If you ever lose to Riku, the game won't let you forget it. Sora will always remind you of the score between them, which means Sora has those stats memorized. It makes a lot of sense for Sora to keep track of the score if Riku losing is uncommon. The lifelong score is probably so heavily in Riku's favor that he has no need to keep track of his wins anymore. On the other hand, every win for Sora is a big deal. In short, Riku is portrayed as the much stronger between the two. There's also a couple other important details about Riku besides his strength. He's a year older than Sora, which gives him a leg up on maturity on paper at least. Riku's also a nice kid for the most part. He's not nearly as bubbly as Sora, but he's social and doesn't act too cool even if his strength would give him a reason to do so. With that picture of Riku in mind, in combination with Sora's friendly, optimistic profile from earlier, Surely there's no reason for Riku to ever get jealous of Sora, right? Let's talk a little about Kairi now. Just in case you don't know, Kairi isn't from Destiny Islands. She just showed up one day while they were all young kids, but she linked up with Sora and Riku and the trio became best friends. Well, it's a little more complicated than that. Sora and Kairi have mutual crushes on each other and have for a long time. They haven't spoken to each other about it, but there's this subtle understanding between them. Riku is aware of this dynamic, and he teases Sora about it. Actually, let me rephrase that. He taunts Sora about his crush in a specific way that I think is very telling. At the beginning of the game, Sora and Riku decide to have an obstacle course race to decide who gets to name their raft. Sora opts to up the stakes by saying if he wins, he gets to be the captain, and then Riku cuts him off by saying if he wins the race, he gets to share a Paopu fruit with Kairi. For context, the Paopu fruit is a made-up Kingdom Hearts fruit with a myth surrounding it. The saying goes that if you share a Paopu fruit with someone, then your fates will forever be intertwined. Since Riku knows that Sora has a crush on her, this is a pretty effective way at trying to get under his skin. A little too effective, I think. Riku claims he was just joking later, but I think this taunt is too mean and specific to write off as just that. Riku's implication with the Paopu fruit is he's going to make Kairi his girlfriend. Note that he doesn't consider Kairi's say in the matter at all. Let me clarify that I'm not insinuating that Riku also has a crush on Kairi and is competitive with Sora over her, because that's not what I think is going on here at all. Rather, I think Riku is jealous of the fact that Sora might have a girlfriend soon in general. It has nothing to do with Kairi specifically, or any other romantic feelings Riku might have. It's more that getting into a relationship is a mature thing to do. It's a sign of growing up, and Riku doesn't know how to feel about Sora having this leg up on him now. I view his taunt with the Paopu fruit as a sign of Riku's insecurity surrounding Sora and Kairi's relationship. Riku's always been the older, cooler, more mature one between him and Sora. If Sora and Kairi were to become official, then now there's finally an aspect where Riku is left behind. Riku is the type of kid who wants to grow up quickly. He wants to be seen as mature. He wants to do adult things. That's been true ever since Riku was a very young kid, talking with Sora about wanting to go on real adventures, not kid stuff. He doesn't want to be limited by his childhood island. This is where our main source of conflict in the story comes from, which also means it's ripe for analysis. We can read the trio's desire to leave the Destiny Islands as a symbol for them wanting to grow up. They're literally planning on leaving their childhood home in order to head into the unknown, with no stated plans of coming back. I don't think it's a stretch to say that's imagery for leaving their childhood behind as they move toward adulthood. Sora even abandons his mom and she's never brought up in the game again. Ignoring the obvious logistical problems with their raft for a moment, them making their own raft in the first place and planning to set sail together can be read as the three of them forging their path in life as a trio. They all want to grow up together. But that's not quick enough for Riku. Riku is the one who lets darkness into Destiny Islands. He's the one who causes their world's destruction, and it was because he was so desperate to leave the islands. He couldn't wait just a little longer. He's trying to rush growing up, and the game very clearly doesn't approve of Riku's actions. The key takeaway for demonstrating that concept is how Riku's desperation caused his key takeaway. Riku falling to darkness is when Sora obtains the Keyblade for the first time. We find out later that this Keyblade was originally supposed to be Riku's, but it went to Sora because he just happened to be there while Riku was swallowed by the darkness. If the fact that their world was violently destroyed wasn't enough, then Riku losing out on the legendary Keyblade because he was impatient is a pretty good sign that the game is advocating against his behavior. If you're not convinced of the symbolic reading here yet, then let's circle back to the opening cinematic. If we can apply the reading to more areas of the game, then that's decent evidence that we should take it seriously. Alright, so if the trio setting sail is supposed to be a symbol of them leaving their childhoods behind and growing up, then what does it mean to move through water? In this metaphor, it would mean to move through time. Riku letting himself get taken by the wave can be read as Riku wanting time to advance rapidly. Sora, on the other hand, moves through water at a consistent pace, and that's because he's not trying to rush growing up like Riku is. The real connective piece, though, is when Sora sees himself falling. He takes a moment to laugh with Kairi, losing track of time. It's only when he looks up at the sky does he realize he's still falling into water. He's still been aging the entire time. As we know, no matter how much we live in the moment always passes eventually. You could even go a step further and say Sora looking at the sky to see himself falling is notable because Sora's name means sky in Japanese. That adds another layer of Sora looking at himself to see that he's still falling into water, meaning he's still aging. This part isn't that solid since Riku and Kairi mean land and sea in Japanese respectively, and I don't really think there's any deeper meaning to their names, so it might just be a coincidence for Sora, but I thought I'd mention it anyway. Alright, let's circle back to Riku. What happens to him after he tries to rush growing up? He falls in with the wrong crowd, the League of Disney Villains. Maleficent manipulates Riku, driving a wedge between him and Sora throughout the game. She convinces him that Sora has completely moved on to his new friends, and uses Kairi as leverage to get Riku to enact her evil schemes. To Riku's credit, he's at least aware that the Disney villains aren't a trustworthy crowd, but he goes along with them anyway, mostly because of Kairi. This introduces us to the second major issue Riku has that ties in greatly to the overall theme of the game. Despite Riku desperately wanting to grow up, he also wants to take his childhood as it was with him into his adulthood. Let me elaborate. Kairi loses her heart when Destiny Islands falls to darkness. Maleficent is lying to Riku that helping her evil plans is the way to restore Kairi back to normal. Riku is willing to do pretty much anything if it's to save Kairi, and this causes an immense amount of bitterness toward Sora. From Riku's perspective, Sora is slacking off. He's messing around with Donald and Goofy, total strangers to Riku, rather than focusing on saving Kairi. While Maleficent encourages his bitterness, I don't think she's fully responsible for it. Riku is definitely at fault too. Sora, Riku, and Kairi were best friends for around 10 years. It's unfathomable to Riku that Sora is treating people he just met in the same way he would Riku and Kairi. This is obviously unreasonable on Riku's end, but I think it's a pretty realistic struggle that teenagers go through. Did you have the same group of friends in college as you did in high school? In high school as you did in middle school? How about between middle school and elementary school? Elementary school and kindergarten, even? You can keep going through a bunch of different phases in life, but I think it's easiest to conceptualize through school years. For me at least, my group of friends changed dramatically every few years. There's a bunch of people that I was close with in high school that I just don't talk to anymore. It's not like we have any issues with each other, we just sort of went different directions in life and didn't keep up. This is totally normal, and it's a part of growing up. People travel their own paths in life, and we only have so much time to spend. Even if a couple people stick around, I'm sure there are others that don't. I don't think this is a concept that Riku understands. He sees Donald and Goofy as a threat to his friendship with Sora. Let me emphasize that what Riku fears isn't even happening. Sora actively wants things to go back to normal with Riku, but Riku doesn't believe it, and I think this is a large component of why he acts the way he does. He fixates on doing everything in his power to bring Kairi back because at least she isn't moving on to other friends. He's ahead of Sora in the quest for figuring out how to help Kairi, which only reinforces his belief that Sora has left him and Kairi behind. Alright, let's take a bit of a breather. We've established a lot about Sora, Riku, Kairi, and their relationships, but we haven't said much about what Kingdom Hearts is actually trying to tell us. It's clear that we're not meant to follow what Riku does, at least. Everything in the game more or less happens because of his insecurities. Which character are we meant to follow, then? Well, in this case, I think the simplest answer is actually the correct one. It's the character that we follow throughout the game. Sora. We don't need to go over every step of Sora's journey in detail, but I do want to talk about some parts of it. Even though I'm claiming Sora is supposed to be our role model, he doesn't start the adventure as a perfect hero who's got everything under control. He's surprisingly weak at the beginning of the game, and I believe this is intentional on a narrative level. For gameplay reasons, it makes sense to limit Sora at the beginning so the player feels a strong sense of progression as they level up, but the game really limits Sora. You don't have access to dodging until after completing the first Traverse Town visit. That's crazy, right? Who's ever heard of an action game where a fundamental mechanic like dodging enemy attacks had to be unlocked? Moreover, the first few worlds of the game do a good job at connecting Sora's awkward start to his journey with the player. Wonderland and Deep Jungle are two of the most confusing worlds to navigate in the entire series, which is a strange decision for the start of a game when the player is still getting used to everything. I'd even go as far as saying that Hollow Bastion is less confusing than them. The last early game world is Olympus Coliseum, but that isn't able to be completed for a long time, even though it's potentially the first world you visit. Sora just gets told he's not a true hero yet, even after defeating Cerberus, and you have to come back later. All three of them just feel clunky and disjointed. I'm not fully sure if this confusing design was intentional or not, though. For instance, I think this specific vine in Deep Jungle not being clearly shown to the player is just a mistake. When you realize it's there, then the whole world makes sense again. Even if their design wasn't intentional, it's what ended up in the game, so I'm just going to take it at face value. Alright, so why did I bring up Sora's awkward beginning? Well, it's because it doesn't last. Sora really does improve throughout his adventure, gaining more skills with the Keyblade and giving the player a much more fun gameplay experience in every world not named Atlantica. What doesn't change, though, is Sora himself, really. He's the same optimistic person at the end of the game that he is at the beginning. He doesn't go through any major character arc. That's not to say he doesn't learn anything, we'll get there in a bit, but what Sora learns doesn't really change him in any way. This is because Sora is just so honest, with others and himself. Sora wears his heart on his sleeve. He sees the best in everyone, and he believes the best outcome is always possible for everyone involved. He never hesitates to help someone in need, but he doesn't go so far as to let himself be taken advantage of. Is this not already admirable? That's why Sora is a role model for the audience. He's meant to be proof that it is possible to navigate through life with such a positive outlook. That also ties back to why Sora is written to never be deceived by a villain. His mindset is portrayed as something we should aspire toward, whereas Riku's is something the game advocates against. I'd say this is best demonstrated in Sora's sacrifice. When Sora learns Kairi's heart took refuge in his body, he doesn't hesitate to unlock his own heart and turn into a Heartless so Kairi can be revived. This is Sora's tendency to put himself in danger to help others taken to its extreme end. He's been like this for the entire game. It's who he is. Sora is so true to himself, actually, that he's still conscious as a Heartless. Kairi is able to use her magic powers to restore him back to normal, but I think the insight we're meant to gain here is that Sora is never not himself. That's how honest of a person he is. You can even contrast that with Riku in this same scene, who is literally not himself anymore. He's currently being possessed by Ansem. Sora's mindset is definitely idealistic, I won't deny that. It may even seem unrealistic, but that's where the beginning of the game comes in. It's important for Sora to be shown struggling at the start of the game to help the audience relate to him. If Sora was effortlessly saving the worlds from the get-go, then it's a lot harder to remember that Sora is just a teenager. It humanizes him, essentially. The early game being so limited also makes progression much easier to see and feel on the player's end, which is communicating that it is possible to grow with Sora's mindset in life through gameplay. The detail that the Keyblade was actually Riku's also helps with this. There was nothing special about Sora. He was just a kid in the right place at the right time. If we can see Sora as an actual person instead of a perfect hero, then maybe, just maybe, we'll be able to realize that Sora's optimism is achievable in real life too. There is one major lesson Sora learns, though. It's toward the end of the game in Hollow Bastion, when Sora loses his Keyblade. Riku is able to take it from him, since the Keyblade was originally his in the first place. He tosses Sora a wooden sword, the toy they used to spar with back at Destiny Islands, which is essentially Riku gloating that he's more grown up than Sora at this point. Donald and Goofy leave Sora since their orders were to follow the Keyblade, leaving Sora all alone. But without skipping a beat, Sora makes friends with Beast and they press on into the castle. The two eventually make it to Riku, where Donald and Goofy decide they should probably stick with their friend rather than follow an order with no nuance. Here, Sora gives his iconic "My friends are my power" speech, which results in him earning the Keyblade for real this time. In his speech, he says that his heart isn't alone. All of his travels gave him new experiences and allowed him to meet new people. and all those friendships he made became a part of his heart, just like he became a part of theirs. And right here, this concept Sora is talking about now is exactly what Kingdom Hearts is really about, and what we've been building up to the entire time. Think back to what we said about friend groups changing as we get older and Riku's insecurities. The people relevant in our everyday lives naturally change as time goes on. We all have our own paths in life to follow, and they don't always cross over, but that doesn't make those fleeting relationships any less important. We are the sum of our experiences, and everyone we connect with leaves an impression on us somehow. Sora is calling upon the strength of all the friends he's made, secure in the memories they shared together, and using that feeling to empower himself. This idea gets reiterated a little later in the story with the Final Fantasy gang in Hollow Bastion. They let Sora know that once the day is saved, all the worlds will go back to being separate, and they have no idea if they'll ever see each other again. Sora is totally okay with this, though, and the game repeats several times that they'll always have each other in their hearts, just to make sure we understand the lesson. Hey, it's still a children's story. Sometimes you have to spell things out a little bit. We've been in the endgame of the story for a while, but I think the message of being at peace with going our separate ways with people we meet ties in heavily to the dream sequence at the very beginning of the game. Sora can choose the path of the sword, shield, or staff, and they permanently affect his gameplay attributes. His stats will be modified, and he'll learn different skills at different levels for each weapon. It's a neat way to give the player some agency in a character build, but what's interesting is after choosing a weapon, we're forced to give up one in exchange. In a way, this is like picking our own path in life and leaving another behind, right? I mean, the weapons aren't friends we've made, but the vibe is similar, yeah? Maybe I'm reading too deeply into this part, but I figured it was worth mentioning. Although, while we're at the beginning of the story again, remember the raft? The one with so many logistical issues for traveling across the ocean that it makes you wonder if the trio ever actually got a formal education? Our metaphor from a while ago said that the trio making their own raft was like them trying to proceed in life together. But if the game has a strong theme of being at peace with going separate ways with friends, then maybe the problems with the raft mean something. Maybe the raft was obviously never going to function because it's just unrealistic to take the same path in life as your two childhood friends. Everyone needs to go their own way, especially in these formative teenage years. Maybe they'll cross again in the future, there's nothing wrong with that, but everyone does need to find their own way. Now with all that being said, we can finally talk about the hook at the beginning of the video. How the game ends with Sora, Riku, and Kairi not reunited. I think you can probably tell where I'm going with this already, right? It ties in again to how we need to be at peace with going in different directions from our friends. The story couldn't have ended with the trio reuniting if it wanted to stay thematically consistent. That's why we don't get that perfect happy ending, despite the game being written with no sequel in mind. Kairi goes back to the Destiny Islands. Riku is locked away in the Realm of Darkness. Sora continues his travels with Donald and Goofy to make sure their friends are okay. It's not that Sora, Riku, and Kairi aren't close friends anymore. They still absolutely care about each other and they want to see each other. It's just not realistic for them to all grow up interlinked like they were trying to do at the beginning of the game. That's all it is. It's nothing super dramatic in the grand scheme of things from an adult perspective, but for teenagers that never got out of their small-town world, I can understand why this lesson might seem so radical, and also why Riku got so insecure in the first place. Speaking of Riku's insecurity, the game ends with one last piece of imagery that I just have to point out. It's when Sora and Riku close the door to darkness, and when it fades away, it reveals a long, winding path. We can read this as a symbol for what Riku did in the story and what he lost out on. He tried to take a shortcut to growing up by letting in the darkness to Destiny Islands, but it actually just ended up being a nightmare. He lost out on the natural maturing process, represented by the long and winding path. It takes time. It's awkward to navigate. But it's better than wherever Riku ended up at the end of the game, that's for sure. Alright, now it's time to wrap things up. What have we learned today? Kingdom Hearts is a game all about growing up, finding our paths in life, and how we should think of our past and future friendships. It encourages us to adopt an optimistic mindset as time moves on, not fearing that we might lose touch with our old friends one day, but embracing it and understanding their importance regardless of how long they stay in our lives. Or maybe it's just a silly game where a kid swings around a giant key, has lots of fun with Disney's iconic characters, and gets to be whooped by Sephiroth all in the same adventure. That's fine too, and that's the beauty of art. Even the most outlandish concept like a Disney and Final Fantasy crossover series can invoke genuinely strong emotions from its audience. And more than any particular interpretation of the story, I wanted to demonstrate that. Kingdom Hearts absolutely is a silly series, but I love it, and I hope this reading at the very least gave you some extra appreciation for it too. We have now finally reached the end. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please do make sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe so I can make more videos like these. If you especially liked the video and want to support me directly, then you can also consider becoming a channel member. Before we truly end, there are a couple of things I wanted to mention that didn't quite fit anywhere in the script. First, the mysterious narrator of Kingdom Hearts says something about Sora pretty often, that he is the one who will open the door to the light. The narrator says it at the beginning of the game, and even at the end, after closing the giant door. I tried for a while to weave this one who will open the door concept into the video's thesis, but I just wasn't able to. If you have any ideas, let me know in the comments. Even from a literal in-universe perspective, I don't know what it's referring to. I guess maybe Sora caused light to emanate from Kingdom Hearts at the end? But then why does the narrator still say Sora will open the door in the future after that happens? I really just don't know from both a literal and figurative standpoint. Second, this is going to be a weird detail to highlight, but I have to say, Kingdom Hearts might have the best player health bars ever. I can't explain why, but it's just so satisfying to see the green bar circle around Sora's icon and eventually extend way past the boundary. That's really all I can say about it. I just like it a lot, and I'm curious if anyone else feels similarly. Lastly, the secret ending to Kingdom Hearts 1 is, to this day, one of my favorite cinematics in gaming ever. I can't even begin to describe how cool this was to see when the whole game beforehand was bright and colorful. It raised so many questions, but the aesthetic of dual-wielding Oathkeeper and Oblivion in the pouring rain shaped my childhood interests for a long time. With that knowledge, you can take a wild guess on who my favorite Kingdom Hearts character is. Maybe you'll hear more about him in a future video. Alright, that's it for real. Thank you once again for watching, and see you next time.